Hi, everyone, and welcome back for another episode of Malice in the Mitten. I am your host, Tracy Preston, along with my bestie, Christine Mulligan. Hey, Christine.
Hey, Trace. Hey, everybody. All right, so we're in a series right now, right? So what are we getting into today?
Yes, we are. So on our last Malice show, we talked about what happened to Todd Geib. We also talked about how the detectives believe that he is one of the victims of the Smiley face killers. But as I mentioned in Todd's story, there are more men that after I tell you their stories, I wonder what you think. Do you all think that they are connected? So let's get into it. This is season 7, episode 13, Tommy Booth and the Smiley face killers. Tommy Booth was born on August 18th, 1993. He was 5 feet 10 inches tall and weighed 175 pounds. According to his missing person flyer by the Newcastle County Police Criminal Investigation Unit, he is described as having black hair and blue eyes. He was last seen wearing a black leather jacket, a blue button-down dress shirt, and blue jeans on January 19th, 2008. He was 24 years old. Tommy's mother always believed her son's death was suspicious and believes that he was murdered. Barbara Mackey, Tommy's mother, describes him as a good kid, sensitive, sincere, a mama's boy, and he was proud of that. Tim Bush, Tommy's stepfather, said he was intelligent and artistic, and also said that he was a master drywaller. At the time Tommy lost his life, he was at a good point in his life. He was making great money and had a very bright future ahead of him. His parents found out he was missing the night after he went out. Barbara stated when speaking to Gannon and Duarte, now these are the detectives that were, researching all these cases, that she knows for a fact that Tommy was not lying in the river out behind Bootleggers, which is the bar they went to, because Tommy's co-worker had walked along the creek's water line looking for Tommy the day before he was found. He said that Tommy's body was not there when he went searching for him. Barbara told detectives that for her, it's like this just happened yesterday, and she wants closure. Barbara also told detectives that a week before he went missing, that he had received a call, and she could tell that it just wasn't good. She also learned that Tommy was looking for a new place to live, and that he had been thinking of starting over in Florida. Now, this is something she learned after Tommy's death. Barbara also believed that her son is tied to the Smiley face killer cases because all of these scenarios are the same. The men go out with their friends, they disappear, and then are found in water days later, and a smiley face is found relatively close to where the bodies are found. Quote, "The County of Delaware Office of the Medical Examiner's Post-Mortem Report, case number 080117, says this. Subsequent discovery 2 weeks thereafter are suspicious, as is the finding of a drag mark arising from the decedent's head/upper torso with possible foot/shoe impressions adjacent to either side of the drag mark. These findings are directed upstream and was likely created from hours, 1 to 2 days prior to the decedent's discovery. Nonetheless, a large amount of money as well as multiple personal effects were found undisturbed within the clothing associated with the decedent. Based upon the available evidence derived from both the autopsy examination and from scene assessment, it is the prosector's opinion that the cause of death is probably drowning associated with mixed ethanol. The rest is redacted on the report. And then it says,
the manner of death is rendered undetermined, with the opportunity to amend these opinions being reserved should more definitive investigative information be forthcoming at some point in the future.
Now, as in Todd Geib's case, it's also important to note that the autopsy report also noted that there was very mild decomposition on Tommy's body. The medical examiner's report also noted that the body is stiff and appears to be in full rigor. Now, we have talked about rigor mortis in one of our previous round robin discussions, so let me define what it is. Once a body dies, there are changes that occur, and these changes occur in stages. Quote,
rigor mortis is the third stage after death, in which the muscles harden and become stiff. Now, this is caused by the lack of adenosine triphosphate, also known as ATP, and it is ATP that provides the energy to the muscles.
Now, for some reason, I can still hear and see my anatomy and physiology professor teaching us about this. Great class, by the way. Anyway.
It is the presence of rigor mortis that allows for the ability to determine time of death.
Now, here's how it works. Quote,
following death, the muscles become weak because the brain cannot tell the muscles to contract or release. After a few hours, this energy reserve starts to drain until it is completely depleted. Without any breathing activity or food consumption, no ATP, aka energy, is produced. The muscles freeze in a position they are in. The freezing or stiffening of the muscles happens throughout the entire body, but there are muscles that are affected first, and those are the eyelids, the face, and fingers. Now, there are 6 stages of rigor mortis which are absent, minimal, moderate, advanced, complete, and past.
So let's talk about that first stage.
It's called pallor mortis. This is the first sign, and it occurs rapidly within the first 30 minutes of death, and that is the look of paleness of the skin. And this is because all blood circulation has ceased. Then we have algo mortis, and this is related to body temperature. Because we are warm-blooded creatures, we maintain a certain body temperature on or around 98.6 degrees. Now, this is life-sustaining and regulated by the brain. Once death occurs, the brain stops sending signals, which in turn stops the heart from pumping blood. Once the heart stops pumping blood, the body will begin to cool. Now, it takes approximately 20 hours for the body to cool down to the temperature outside of the body.
So to the external temperature around the body.
Which now takes us into the next stage, and that is rigor mortis. This is when the body becomes stiff. Now, initially, the body after death becomes limp, then stiffens as the muscle fibers contract and basically freeze. Now, this process begins over the next few hours after death. The life cycle of rigor mortis occurs over 24 to 48 hours. Now, of course, there are factors involved such as environmental temperature, how fit the body is, if there are drugs in the body, or infection.
So here's the breakdown of rigor.
Within the first 8 hours of death, the body begins hardening, but is still somewhat pliable. In between 8 and 12 hours, the muscles become completely stiff. Between hours 12 and 24, the muscles remain still. 24 to 36 hours after death, the stiffness relaxes and the muscles become flexible once again. Then we have livor mortis. Now, this is the last phase of death. After the heart ceases to beat, the blood that runs through our arteries and veins, and then, of course, right, everything exchanges through the capillary beds, all that blood is now pulled by gravity and will collect in areas that are dependent on the body. Now, we also call this lividity. Think of it as a bruise, a big one. When blood settles, you will see a bright red color. After a few hours, that red will turn to blue or purple.
Again, imagine a big, big bruise.
This is seen approximately 6 to 8 hours after death.
So, for example, if a body is found lying face up, the lividity will be seen on the posterior trunk of the body, the buttocks, the back of the legs, etc. If the body is face down, the lividity is seen in the face, the chest, the abdomen, so on and so forth. Lastly, we have decomposition.
There are a couple stages of decomposition. So one is autolysis, and the other is putrefaction. Autolysis begins when our cells after death release certain enzymes. Now, the enzymes continue to release for approximately a couple of hours after the cells do not receive oxygen. They die, and therefore, the cell wall structure breaks down, hence the release of their enzymes into the body.
Now, autolysis also reminds me of what happens when someone has a heart attack, also known as myocardial infarction, or, like Becky wants me to say, apoplexy. Haha, got it. Nailed it. She'll never get me again. At least on that word. Now, the cardiac cells are starved of oxygen. They break down and release enzymes into the blood. And that's why if you or someone you know has ever had a heart attack, that their blood needs to be drawn in 6-hour intervals. And what we're looking for is the extent of cardiac cell death, which, by the way, can never be regenerated. So once those cells are dead, they are dead and never come back. So that's my public service announcement. Don't waste any time. If you are concerned that you're having a heart attack, get your body into the emergency room, please. Stat. All right.
After autolysis ends, the body now enters a state called putrefaction. This is when the body becomes bloated from all of the cell death and decay of the organic tissue. Bacteria is released inside the body, and gases are produced.
Right? So we can't breathe out the bad gases anymore. We can't blow off that CO2.
And that's where putrid comes from. The putrid smell is from putrefaction.
Yes, it is.
Ugh.
Yeah. All right, now.
At this stage, this is when the eyes and the tongue may become engorged.
And the body, like Christine said, begins to smell.
Bloating is seen usually found around the second day after a person has passed and can last between 5 and 6 days.
Now, I know I dug deep into all those terms, but I did that for a reason. So let's get back to January 19th, 2008. Tommy had gone out that night drinking with a group of his friends at the Bootleggers Bar in Ridley Township, Pennsylvania. There were 9 of them in total, 7 men and 2 women. Now, there's a video surveillance of Tommy and his friends in line to enter the bar that night. None of them had ever even been to this bar or had heard of it before, and it was quite a little bit of a distance away from where they lived in Maryland. Apparently, one of the friends had found this place online, and this is where they decided to go this night for a good time out together. Now, it sounds like there was a little mischief going on with some of the friends. You know, they fired up a couple blunts, which is, smoking pot, inside the bar, and they were told that they had to, skedaddle. You're not allowed to do that here. And one of the friends was named Tim, and he was left behind. Everybody else took off because it was Tim's job to make sure that Tommy had a way to get home. There were 3 cars in total that the friends had ridden up to get into, to get up to Bootleggers. So there were multiple cars. Now, according to a statement from Tim, it was the end of the night and it was approximately 2 o'clock in the morning. And Tim was looking all over the bar for Tommy, but he couldn't find him. Now, there are cameras, as I mentioned, at the front entry of the bar, but guess where they're not? They're not at the back of the bar or outside of the back of the bar. It was 14 days later that Tommy's body was found behind the bar in Ridley River or Ridley Creek. I've seen it said both ways, so I'm not certain. It's not huge, so maybe it is creek. Now, he was found face down, and his body was pretty much in pristine condition. But here's the thing. There's a drag mark that looks like it came from Tommy's head, leading to his body in the river along the bank. He was found in full rigor mortis, which means he was dead less than 24 hours. His nose and mouth were full of packed mud and, little rocks that were in the mud. There were also 2 sets of footprints, and there were no signs of trauma. His wallet was still in his back pocket, and because of this, police ruled out the probability of robbery. Now, something to note here. The entrance of Bootleggers is a 1-story, right? So it's in a plaza. So when you look at it, it just looks like a 1-story bar. But out back, the exterior of Bootleggers is really 2 stories. There is a door that opens to the back of the bar, then a deck and stairs that you can then walk down to get on the ground. But below the deck is a basement on the ground floor that has exit doors. Now, where you would exit from the basement, there's a cinder block wall, which of course makes up the basement, which contained spray-painted graffiti, and smack dab in the middle of all that graffiti was a large spray-painted smiley face. Police theorized that Tommy was out drinking with his buddies and was quite intoxicated when he exited the bar from the back exit of Bootleggers. Oopsie, he slipped and fell in the creek and drowned. Now, I also want to point out something here. It is not like this river creek is like smack dab right outside the door of Bootleggers, because it's not. Tommy would have had to walk to the river like at least a couple of 100 feet, maybe more. So basically, he would have had to have tripped and fell a couple of 100 feet to get into that river. Okay?
Well, is it a downward kind of slope or no?
No, not really. So in the episode that I watched, the 2 detectives are out back and they're looking, and it's kind of pretty flat. Then you have some trees, and then it kind of from there starts to slant downward to the water. So no, it's not like oopsie, I just tripped and rolled straight in. No, he would have had to have walked a nice little distance and then trip at the tree line. So who knows? Maybe he was taking a leak, let's just say.
Hella not likely, though.
Probably not.
Okay.
All right. Police also theorized that Tommy wasn't found initially because after he slipped and fell and drowned, that the creek froze over that night or within the next couple of nights, concealing Tommy's body underneath the ice. Once the ice melted, this is when Tommy's body was seen. They also explained that this is why his body was in such good condition. However, Captain Willoughby, who was assigned to Tommy's case, when all this happened, said that it was when they saw the smiley face spray painted there at the back of the bar on the concrete that something just felt suspicious to him, but they couldn't find any foul play, and no one was coming forward with anything for them to go on or to follow up on. When Gannon asked Willoughby if they were able to uncover any new evidence, would he be willing to have another look into what really happened to Tommy that night in January? Willoughby's answer, yes. He would be willing to reinvestigate, as he has stayed in contact with Barbara, which is Tommy's mother, over all these years, and he really would like to get some closure on this case and for his family. So, Gannon and his team headed down to the river where Tommy's body was found to perform an experiment with a crime scene analyst. While at the site where Tommy was found, Doc was asked by the analyst, quote,
"Do you believe the theory that Tommy's body was in the water for 14 days, frozen, and this is why his body was in such good condition?
Doc's response, quote,
"If you freeze something, the water expands. It breaks the cell wall. So when you thaw it out, it decomposes very, very rapidly and becomes mush. You don't see that in the crime scene photos. He should have been black and bloated out here, and he wasn't."
Gannon said that on any death case, quote, "you always investigate it as a murder first and then work backwards from there. You can't go to a scene and just assume that it was an accident." Now, at this point, Gannon and his team left the analyst and his team to work the scene and develop their own conclusions. After contacting the owner of the plaza that housed the bar where Tommy was last seen, Doc and retired detective Mike Donovan gained access into Bootlegger's bar, which at the time of their investigation, I believe it was like 10 years later, Bootleggers had gone out of business. Now, I don't know exactly when they went out of business, but when I watched the walkthrough on the episode, there was still a lot of items inside of Bootleggers. So I can't imagine it may have been closed too long. Not sure though. But there were remnants of tables and chairs, bottles, like liquor bottles. I don't know if they were empty or what, but there were still bottles on the shelves, which I found really interesting. And even like one of those games, like one of those basketball games, you know, like where you toss it up and then you get like 5 or 6 basketballs to see how many hoops you can make. Anyway, as the men walked through and walked toward the back of the bar, they walked toward a stage where bands would play. And behind the stage, they found a hallway that led to a door which opened to the deck, as I described before. And also, you could get into the basement of the bar from this corridor by making a left before the door. Now, outside the door lies Ridley Creek, where Tommy was discovered. And now here they're saying it's approximately 200 yards. So that's quite a distance. When Doc and Donovan walked outside through the basement door, they looked at the cinder block wall where the graffiti and smiley face were painted with spray paint. But at this time, the wall had been repainted that concealed all that. However, they still could make out the smiley face through the paint. But here's the crazy part. They found a pencil drawing of another smiley face just above their heads on a wood beam over that painted wall. Now, I want to mention that there is a double steel set of doors that come out of the basement out to the back of the bar, and this is where the graffiti and the smiley face were. When the men walked down to the river, they noted that the water was pretty clear and only about a foot deep. Gannon spoke with Bill Durr. Now, he was a former co-worker of Tommy's and a current co-worker when Tommy had disappeared. He had volunteered along with many to look for Tommy with a search party. He said he started at the front of the bar, then worked his way behind the bar and down to the creek. Bill told Gannon that he walked as close to the water as he could. He said he did not see anything at all. From where Bill was told they found Tommy's body, he said that he was standing at that spot. So if Tommy was there, he would have seen him. Bill walked this route looking for his friend just a mere 24 hours before Tommy's body was found. Gannon asked Bill if he would be willing to look at the photos of Tommy's body where he was found, and he agreed. And while reviewing the photos, he was asked by Gannon, quote,
"Do you think those could have been your footprints in the mud next to Tommy's body?"
Bill's response, a resounding no. I was back further. When Gannon told Bill that, quote,
"Police theorized that the river was frozen and Tommy was under the ice. Perhaps this is why you didn't see him."
Bill's response again, no. That area was not frozen. So where was Tommy for 13 days?
Yeah, and you went through all that rigor Mortis stuff, which I was trying to pay attention to and listen, even though it was a little bit of a review. We're not in mortuary science, we're nurses. So I paid attention, but he was found 14 days later in full rigor, which means 24 hours. So for actually 13 days is the question. What was happening for 13 days?
Exactly. Same thing with Todd Geib. Now, he was gone for 21 days, 22 days, body in the same condition, pretty much as Tommy's.
Yeah, but I don't hear you talking about anything else on the bodies, like any bruising or, sexual assault or some kind of funny business for all the missing time. Like, what was the smiley face? Okay, if it is a smiley face killer, what was the smiley face killer doing with them? Like, literally suspending them in time in all other ways until they're found deceased.
I don't know. That's the mystery right there, isn't it? Because, same thing with Todd Geib. Like, there is no clear-cut reason of how he died. It's very strange. And Tommy didn't have, now all he had really on his body was the lividity. He was fully dressed. I saw the crime scene photo. He was fully dressed, face down. And you couldn't really see his arms because they were contracted, right? They were in rigor in front of his body that he was laying on. So I don't know. It's a total freaking mystery how these men are actually, like how they actually meet their end.
And if it is a serial killer, like what is his kink? Like what is his thing that I'm saying his like it's automatically a dude. What is their reason for doing this? Like, what you tell me the horrible stories about the kids and stuff. It's a perversion, right? Mm-hmm. It's some kind of perversion that they carry out. Where's the perversion? Where's the perceived necessity for death in the murderer's mind? Do you know what I mean? Like,
yeah, I don't know.
Like the what for, the why is super elusive.
Right.
In both of these cases that we've talked about so far.
Yeah. And as we move forward with the upcoming shows, it's all the same.
Yeah, that's eerie.
It's very eerie. And to me, like these are all, like I mentioned in Todd's episode, these are all big guys. You know what I mean? They're not little mealy men. So to me, in my mind, there's more than one person that's involved. That's just my opinion.
Yeah, it seems that way.
Yeah.
It seems like it's very orchestrated, but with no hints as to the why.
Right.
It's crazy. It's baffling me. I'm listening to you very intently because I'm looking for a why, and there just doesn't seem to be one.
Exactly. I can't find it either. It's bizarre. All right. Detective Donovan paid a visit to Tommy's boss, and his name is Harry Porter, who said that around the time of Tommy's death, Harry said, quote, Tommy wasn't sure who his real friends were, that he had contacted a friend of one of his uncles, and that he was thinking of getting out of town for a while. The people that Tommy was hanging out with were pretty cliquey, and either you were in with them or you were out. Now, it sounds like these friends were into some underground stuff, and this made Tommy uncomfortable. And whatever his friends were into, Tommy didn't want to be a part of it any longer. When Donovan asked Harry if he had ever heard of the Smiley Face Killers, he said he had not. Donovan went on to say, quote, it's an organized group that are into other criminal activity, and that's how they fund themselves. That's how gangs operate. Illegal groups, gangs, fund themselves by selling drugs, selling guns, and theft. Donovan was very serious and told Harry, quote, look, if you know anything, now is the time to say it. There is nothing that can happen to Tommy now. So Harry took a deep breath and said, quote,
Tommy had conversations with me about his group of friends, getting deeper and deeper into doing things like guns and drugs.
Now, see, that right there makes me wonder, could it have possibly been this group of guys, right? This group of friends, could they possibly have been involved? That's where my brain goes when I think about that scenario. Now, at this point, Scott Roeder, the analyst, the crime scene analyst, and his team had completed their thorough investigation, and it was time to present their findings to Gannon and his team. Quote, "We built a CGI model based on all the data from the creek, the scene from the photographs, along with the information that your team provided to me. As I first looked at the case, I really tried to come into this with no opinion. But then after looking at the evidence, what I do know is that this is not an accidental drowning." Scott Roeder, as a third party, along with Gannon, Duarte, Donovan, and Doc, all met with Captain Scott Willoughby of the Ridley Township Police Department to provide Roeder's findings from his analysis. Scott began his presentation to Willoughby, and that he was asked to review the physical and forensic evidence of Tommy's case. He said that he had gone down to the river with Gannon and Doc, where he took measurements and photographs and built a 3D model of the scene where Tommy was found. He said, quote,
"There are 6 components from an evidentiary standpoint that I feel are critical for me to address within the area of my expertise. On January 19th, the prevailing theory is that Tommy exits the pub, goes into the creek, and then somehow becomes incapacitated, falls into the creek, and drowns. Over a period of the next few days, a winter storm comes through and freezes the creek, thereby concealing his body from investigators, search parties, and so forth. One of the first issues that I think is important to look at is the bloating and the decomposition of the body. If you're in the water for 14 and a half days and you are in fact a drowning victim, I think the body would have a much different appearance. You really would see excessive bloating and skin slippage, which we don't see here in Tommy. So lividity, I think, is an extremely important aspect of this case. The onset of lividity happens after the heart stops. The blood's going to go toward gravity and cause purple bruising. Now, as you can see here,
now he's, presenting his slide presentation. He's pointing to what's up on the screen there.
We've got points of contact on the back of the head, his back area, and his buttocks, and that's fixed lividity. Now, that suggests that when he died, he was lying on his back when his heart stopped, and he was there for a substantial period of time for this lividity to become fixed. So I think it is a critical factor to suggest that he was not a drowning victim, but in fact, he died in some other manner. And then we have the rigor mortis, which I think is a really important issue as well. Rigor mortis sets in 8 to 10 hours after death, and then it stays for approximately 10 hours or so before it subsides. If he was, in fact, in the creek for 14 days or so, he wouldn't be all bound up. He'd be released.
Now, as I explained when I gave the definition of the stages of rigor, this just means that the muscles have been, at this point, relaxed.
Tommy had fixed rigor mortis in his jaw and his upper extremities, and we looked at the issue of could him being frozen have caused the lividity to last longer than it would normally last, and that answer is no. The tissue in a frozen body is in the fatty tissues, whereas lividity is in the muscles and the joints. So after taking a look at this scene, I think there's some really important factors. For example, we've got what I think is a drag mark. His feet are in a position that would suggest being dragged by his feet.
Now, this is when Willoughby kind of popped up out of his seat and he started pointing at the image of the screen on Tommy's body. And he's like, hey, wait, hold on. Let me explain something. The river moves left to right. Tommy's body had been pushed up against the shore, positioning his body there where it was found. When Scott asked Willoughby, well, if that's what you think happened, what do you think about the drag mark? Willoughby said, quote, I don't think it's a drag mark. I think it's a mark made by the water going around the body. Scott pointed out again that, quote, Tommy was on his back when he died and on a hard surface, and there is no way he was on his back on a hard surface if you're floating in a creek. This is fixed lividity, so he had to have been on his back for 8 to 10 hours. I believe there is enough evidence here to suggest that it's more probable than not that he was not a drowning victim. Willoughby's response? Listen, I'm not a pathological expert. I don't even know what lividity is. I would have to rely on the expert that I trust, and that would be Dr. Cyril Recht, who I know well and respect. If he was to come to me and say this is an absolute homicide, if we miss something, I'm man enough to say that we'll go back and we'll take a look at it. So, who do you think Cannon and Doc went to see next? Yep, Dr. Cyril Recht. They presented the photographs of Tommy's body in the water, the autopsy report, and the results of the analyst's findings to him and asked for his professional opinion. Now, they didn't give any more details. They just handed all this stuff over and let him take a look. Well, Dr. Recht said, quote,
This is a very suspicious death of this 24-year-old healthy, strong, big young man. Missing, I think, for about 12 and a half days, right? Now, the medical examiner's office there, they did list the manner of death as undetermined, which I think at that point in time certainly was the correct thing to do. However, the findings externally are significant and present complicating factors. They comment that rigor mortis is present within the jaw, arms, and legs. Rigor mortis is something that begins to develop a little bit after 2 to 4 hours and remains in place for about 24, 36, 48 hours maximum. There is no way in the world that rigor mortis remains fixed for 14 and a half days. It's not even a close call. Now, this raises a very strong, highly reasonable suspicion from a forensic scientific standpoint. It would be my opinion, based upon a reasonable degree of forensic, scientific, medical certainty, that this case is highly suspicious for foul play. This is a highly, highly suspicious case, no question at all.
Dr. Wecht also went on to say about the police reinvestigating, quote,
Yes, I'm certain they're not going to be exuberant about doing that coming in 10 years later. This is not a case that can honestly be ignored.
So basically, like in Todd Geib's case, nothing was done. Gannon and Duarte went for a second visit to Tommy's mother and stepfather, Barbara and Tim. They laid out everything that they investigated, everyone that they spoke to. They also presented Roeder's crime scene analysis. Barbara and Tim were also told that Tommy was involved in a bad crowd that dealt with guns. Gannon also told them that Tommy was in some kind of trouble and wanted to get out of it, and perhaps this is how this happened to her son. Barb's response, all I want is justice. Captain Willoughby contacted the local medical examiner to discuss the new findings that came to light from Gannon's team regarding Tommy's case. Now, since then, the medical examiner has let Gannon and Barbara know that he wants to see the new evidence and review Dr. Wecht's findings. Now, the show on Tommy's case that aired on February 16th, 2019, to date, and I looked this up right before we did the show just to make sure I hadn't missed anything, there has not been a reclassification of Tommy's manner of death. Oh, Christine, let me ask you, have you ever heard of Tyler Henry before?
Of course.
He's amazing.
Yeah, he's a young little medium boy that has the TV shows. I think he has several, by the way. Yeah, he's interesting.
Yeah, to me, I've seen several of his shows on, it's called Hollywood Medium to the Stars, right? And he blows my mind. He absolutely blows my mind and gives me the shivers, to be honest with you. Well, what I'm going to share with you next is his meeting with Kathy, Tommy's mother. Now, if you've ever watched his show, Hollywood Medium, you know that he is never told anything about the person he's going to read or about any of the surrounding circumstances as to why he's meeting with someone. He wants to go in cold for these readings, and I love that. Now, a lot of the shows that I've seen him do, like I think I've only seen maybe a couple shows where he actually meets the person at their house, but Tyler met Barbara in a hotel room. Gave her a hug when he entered and told her how he does what he does. So let the reading begin. Tyler sat down and began scribbling on a notepad. Now, when I watch him do this, none of it makes any sense. There's lines, there's scribbles, there's hatching. It's very interesting. And this is what was translated to him that he translated to Barb. Someone is coming through that has passed. He was in the water. He also said that where investigators are looking for clues, that they're looking in the wrong place. He asked her, "Does that make any sense to you?" And Barbara nodded yes. Tyler went on to say that he was getting the impression that this person didn't feel right. And he was kind of rubbing on his legs, and he said something about his legs feeling numb. Tyler kept receiving very strongly the name of Rob. Barbara acknowledged the name Rob. Tyler went on to say in no way, shape, or form was this a suicide. He was receiving the impression that this person went from a very loud place to a very quiet place. Tyler said that the spirit's mind was not clear, like something was in his system. Something that he was not familiar with. Tyler said he feels like Rob knows something more. Tyler said he's getting a very strong impression about the investigation around this death. A lot of human error. The details of the investigations are in error. Human error. He then said, search area. People are not looking in the right place. Later, yes, but initially, no. He was not in the water the entire time. Another name came through, and that name is Brian. Brian keeps coming through, he said, and it's different from Rob. And that basically concluded the reading. What do you think about that reading?
Well, what the hell? Who are these names? Did you mention them already, or are they names of his friends?
I think they're names of his friends because the mother, Barb didn't really dive, they keep it kind of real quiet, but she's acknowledging, yes, I know that name Rob, and I think that was a friend of his. Brian, I'm not really sure if that was a friend of Tommy's that she knew, or maybe this is that Brian is one of these names from the friend group that he was trying to get away from. That wasn't clear.
Well, interesting.
Yeah.
So where did they go from any of that? Anywhere?
Well, that was basically the end of the show because the reading with Tyler was a completely different little mini episode. So, like I said, I went back and I tried to search, was Tommy Booth's case reclassified? Was his death certificate and manner of death reclassified? And it's not. It has not been.
All right. So if we're going to believe the medium, he was obviously roofied at the bar.
Sounds like it, right? Now on this...
He went from a loud bar to a quiet place when he woke up.
Right, and the legs feeling weird. Now, just like in Todd Geib's case, right? Now, I didn't, in this particular show, they didn't flash up if they did a blood and urine samples for the autopsy. So I don't know what, if anything, was found in his autopsy. Like, Todd had alcohol, and then he had 2 different, 2 tricyclic antidepressants in his system. Todd's mom said, hey, Todd can hold his beer. I don't believe it. Now, here you have another guy. Now, Tyler is saying he's getting the impression that something's wrong with the legs, that his legs felt numb, like something in his body. Something is in his body that he was not familiar with. So it makes me feel, in my opinion, he was drugged. Just like Todd.
Yeah.
So again, back to your question, why? Why? It's a mystery.
That's crazy.
Yeah.
So still to this day, nothing. They've learned nothing. And this is how long ago now?
This happened in 2000. Hold on, let me zip right. I want to say 2008. Yes, 2008. Yeah.
Wow. Well, damn.
Oh, no. That's nuts. So, for our listeners, do you think Tommy's death was a murder and not a drowning? Do you think that this is the work of the Smiley Face Killers? Please feel free to comment the comment section on the show on YouTube. So thank you all for listening. Please continue to smash that like and subscribe button for our show on YouTube. We appreciate you all for taking the time to listen. So thank you. So we will see you all back on Wednesday for Round Robin. And then make sure you guys come back the following Monday for the next suspected death involved with the Smiley Face Killers. So have a great week, everyone.
Bye.
Bye.